Coming at you from the campus of Bethel College in Mishawaka, Indiana, this is Bethel Pilot Radio.
This is The Ticker, next on BethelPilotRadio.com with John Hanlon. Hello and welcome to The Ticker. My name is John Hanlon and you're listening to BethelPilotRadio.com. And this, of course, is the show where we talk about everything happening in the news. Political news, local news here around Michiana, all kinds of news always happening all the time. Welcome to the show. And coming up today, we have a local sheriff that was on national TV recently. We'll see what he had to say. And also in Indiana. We'll start off with our top story. If you tune into CNN last Thursday night, you might just have spotted a local guy from right here in northern Indiana. He is the Elkhart County Sheriff, and his name is Brad Rogers. And here is what he had to say on CNN's Anderson Cooper 360 show.
And you believe it's a states' rights issue. Do you believe the federal government has any right to any form of gun control?
No, I do not believe so. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution clearly spells out what the federal government should be or is authorized to do. And everything else goes back to the states. It's reserved for the states to mandate that. In Indiana, where I'm from, the Indiana Constitution spells it out even further. In Article 1, Section 32, it says, "The people shall have a right to arm themselves to defend themselves and the state." So, even if it is taken up by the states, they are restricted usually by their own constitution.
Jeff, just from a legal analyst standpoint, what do you make of that?
I mean, that's just factually wrong. The federal government is supreme in this. There is a supremacy clause in the Constitution. If there's a conflict between state law and federal law, the federal government wins. However, the federal government does have to abide by the Second Amendment, too. So the question, there is no doubt that the federal government has the right to engage in some sort of gun control. The question is, what can they ban? They cannot ban handguns. We know that from the Supreme Court. But can they ban assault weapons? Can they ban tanks? Can they ban Stinger missiles? You bet they can. And they do. And so that much we know is that the federal government can ban certain weapons, but they can't ban all weapons.
That was Elkhart County Sheriff Brad Rogers on CNN's Anderson Cooper 360 show last Thursday. And Sheriff Rogers joins us now on the show. Welcome.
Thanks, John. Good to be here with you today.
Thanks so much for coming on. So we just heard your audio there, but tell us a little bit, before we get into the details of the gun control debate, tell us a little bit about the background and how you got there to CNN, how CNN heard about you, and just a little bit about what happened, before you got there.
Well, nationwide, sheriffs have been anticipating the president's executive orders on gun control, and I think once the orders came out, people have been scared. They've been nervous. They are afraid that the government's going to take away their right. And so, quite frankly, sheriffs around the nation, who, by the way, are the highest elected law enforcement officer in the nation, in each particular county, it's troubling to the people. So we as sheriffs, many sheriffs have come together and said, we're not going to enforce an unconstitutional law. And, I wish that there would have been a constitutional sheriff or police officer when Rosa Parks wouldn't give up her seat on a bus many years ago. And, to actually arrest somebody because of the color of their skin is just ludicrous. Well, similarly, it's unconstitutional for the federal government to be mandating these gun laws. So as time goes on, sheriffs have come out on this. CNN contacted an Oregon sheriff and said for him to come out. Sheriff Glenn Palmer from Oregon, and he couldn't for a variety of reasons. Part of it was logistics and getting him there on time. And so he said, how about my friend in Indiana, Brad Rogers? So they contacted me, talked to me for a little bit, said, you're exactly who we need on here. I should have read into that. But anyways, it was important that there was a conservative side to this approach. And albeit in hindsight, I would probably wish that I would have set up some parameters like I'd like to have a rebuttal. So, and of course, this legal expert, to think that he's an attorney or he's a legal expert is almost laughable. Because, the feds, they always like to throw out the supremacy clause. But if they keep reading, yes, the United States Constitution is the supreme law of the land when it's pursuant to the Constitution. And so if they create a law that is unconstitutional, then it's not supreme. And that's what I did. I was chambered. I had that round chambered and ready to go, but they wouldn't let me say it. So, and they actually edited some of my comments at the end of my statement. So it almost appeared a little bit unnatural for him, what I actually quoted and said, that he come out and said that's just not true. So again, that's part of their editing, but it made it look like it was. They had an agenda, and that was it.
Yeah, it would have been nice to give you a little bit of a chance to respond, since obviously they had a pretty good idea of what you were going to say based on statements you had made in the past, and they knew your background, and of course the legal analyst there had a prepared statement all ready to go, and it would, I think it was a little unfair that they didn't give you a chance to respond, and I think it would have helped out the debate. It would have made them look better also as a conversation going on there.
Agreed. But it's not my show, and I was a guest, and so that's the way it goes. But it was a good experience overall, and as I've said in public ways, everybody was very professional there, insofar as in the treatment of me, and I never felt like I was in jeopardy or physical harm or anything like that. It was very very well done, and they had a script and things that they were going by, and I wouldn't have expected any less, I suppose.
So for people who may not be familiar with the supremacy clause and kind of the controversy that you two ran into there, could you just explain it? You did a little bit a second ago, but just for anybody who may not be familiar exactly what the supremacy clause is and the controversy that the legal analyst there, and then what you had to say.
Well, there's a something called the Supremacy Clause in the United States Constitution, and it basically stipulates that the United States Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and so pursuant to the delegation to federal authority that the Constitution provides, and the laws that are created thereof in pursuant to that Constitution, then everything that is the supreme law of the land, and that's where our Supreme Court comes in interpreting that, and so on. What it doesn't mean, though, is that we necessarily need to check our mind at the door and wait for either a court or someone to suggest that it's unconstitutional. If it's clearly unconstitutional, and I gave the example earlier of arresting somebody because of the color of their skin, that's ludicrous. So when you say that we're going to do a gun grab or gun restriction, then again, at the federal level, that's unconstitutional. It's really more of a states issue. Again, Article 1, Section 8 says the number of things that the federal government can do, and the rest is reserved to the states. So if the state of Indiana said, we really need to limit people from having Stinger missiles and tanks and things like that, that's within their right to do that.
So there's been a lot of debate, of course, since recent shootings like the Newtown, Connecticut shooting and others, of what we should do about the issue of these shootings and whether we need to ban certain guns or different ideas. You know, for every person, there's a new idea out there. And I was just wondering what is your opinion on what can be done or what should be done to stop these shootings? Do we need more laws? Do we need stricter gun laws? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't think we need more laws. I think we have plenty of laws on the books. It's still a crime to murder somebody, no matter if you use a hammer or a so-called assault rifle. And so it's important that we put it in perspective that, one, school shootings are still relatively rare in the big picture of things. And quite frankly, Columbine, for example, the terrible tragedy there, happened during the first assault weapons banned during the Clinton administration. So it's not something that is going to keep people from killing. There's going to be ways to get it done, and restricting guns is in my mind not the way to do it. There's some discussion about background checks. I'm in favor of background checks, but again, it depends on if the federal government's going to mandate it and have an unfunded or any funded or funded or unfunded mandate to the sheriffs saying that you need to do this. If you recall, back in 1997, there was a Supreme Court case called Prince versus U.S. That's Printz versus U.S. And it basically held the Brady Bill unconstitutional insofar as that it required sheriffs to do background checks. The Supreme Court said that you cannot, and basically it was a 10th Amendment case. It wasn't a Second Amendment case. And it said that the feds cannot corral local law enforcement, local sheriffs, to do their bidding. And it was a great victory for states' rights. And so it's one thing to have states say that we need to do a background check and how that's handled. But quite frankly, I don't trust the federal government to necessarily handle a proper background check and to determine who is mentally ill or who is abusive. Probably not in the best places to put it in the federal government.
What would you say to some people who have the idea of nobody needs a semi-automatic weapon like an AR-15, which I believe has been used at several of the recent shootings? What would you say to somebody who says nobody needs one of those? We have no reason not to take them off the streets. Why would anybody need a weapon like that is closer to something you would find in the military?
Well, again, at a state level, I probably wouldn't have a big heartache with that. But at a federal level, it's none of their business. It's not something for them to determine. And quite frankly, who am I to, by and large, say that who's somebody, what type of weapon, what style, and how much? And I'm a firm believer that more firearms in a with law-abiding citizens and responsible citizens that we have less tragedies. You have gun-free zones, such as what we've experienced on campuses and theaters and so on, and those are the place where massacres occur, and that's just not very helpful. And so when you have somebody to say, well, we need to get rid of assault rifles, well, primarily handguns are the biggest problem in murders. So are we really wanting to get rid of handguns? What is the ultimate goal here for anybody who is for gun control? And so
I guess the point would be because you can go in and have a mass shooting compared to a handgun where it slows you down. And that also has been some of the debate about smaller magazines and whether we should limit the amount of of ammo and make the magazine smaller so that you can't just you have to reload, and it takes more time. And the theory is that somebody could stop the shooter before they could slip another one in. So anything like that again, I'm sure, like you've said, with the states making the issues, but do you think that could fix any of the problems that we're facing, or what is the solution in your view? A lot of people have debated a lot of things, but is there a solution out there? What can we do to stop these?
Well, gun control isn't it, in my opinion. You can, and I want to remind the listening audience that the Second Amendment was not just for self-defense. The Second Amendment, according to our founding fathers, was to protect us from a tyrannical government. And back then they had muzzle loaders or musket and so on. And so you might ask, well, what kind of weaponry should the people have possession of to avoid a tyrannical government? And I'm not suggesting that's going to happen under this president or anytime in the near future, but it could happen. And history has bore that out throughout the years in different countries and other places. So you asked the question, what kind of weaponry should the citizens have? And I would say, as Judge Napolitano has recently said, whatever it takes, because that, quite frankly, there should be no limits except for what's imposed by the state. And so if you have New York and Illinois who say, we don't want anybody to have guns, okay, I can choose to live in Texas where, quite frankly, they're going to let me have a tank, and I'm taking that, in jest. I don't think they allow that, but, it's just that extreme. So again, it's a state rights issue, and I just don't think gun control is going to be the answer. I think some of the things that we're looking at are things like mental health. And as a sheriff, I have 700 inmates in the Elkhart County Jail. I have a large population of mental illness within those inmates. And so outside of a psychiatric hospital locally here, the jails are typically the largest holding facility for mentally ill people. And so, it used to be that we would be concerned about getting mentally ill people treated, but now the pendulum's swinging the other way, and now we're putting them more in jail. So that's one issue. I think that certainly there's been no probably scientific cooperation, but I think that the violence in movies and video games is certainly a problem. Colonel Gross, Dave Grossi from used to be in the military. He's written a book on killing and on combat, and he documents the rise and the brainwashing, if you will, of our youth to be accustomed to killing. As humans, we really have an aversion to killing another human being, but we can also be trained into killing that human being, and we've done a good job in the military, and we've done a good job in police work. But you see, those two entities have parameters. They have mores. They have ways to restrain and keep a person in check. Whereas the violence to a young person that doesn't have those values, doesn't have those parameters, can really get out of whack. So there's a number of different issues. I don't know that I have all the answers. But, we guard our most elite people, our president, which rightly so should be guarded, and they guard him with guns. And yet some of our greatest treasures, our future, in our children, in our schools, we don't put a guard at the door, in a sense. And I'm not talking necessarily literally, but we just don't guard them from a terrorist or somebody that would come in and do them harm. So why don't we? We spend millions and millions of dollars on fire safety in our schools, and quite frankly, how many kids have been killed by fire in the last 50 years? Zero. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't get concerned about fire safety, but why aren't we spending some resources on keeping them safe from school violence? And that's where, we need to be asking the questions. Not about controlling guns, because quite frankly, you take Chicago, for example, one of the most restrictive cities in the world on gun control. They had 506 murders. That, to me, doesn't say safe.
Absolutely, and that touches a little bit on what I wanted to discuss a little bit next, and that is the idea that many people brought up of armed guards. Should we have armed guards in schools? And there was a story just in the last few days of a young man in Atlanta at a high school, I believe, and he pulled out a gun and started shooting his fellow classmates. And luckily there was an armed guard in the school and was able to get the gun out of the boy's hands before he was able to get many. I believe he did injure one kid, but before he was able to do any more damage, the armed guard that was in the school was able to get the gun away from him. Would you support armed guards in schools? Is that a good idea, or should we be looking for other solutions? I know a lot of people brought up the cost factor, and that certainly is an issue of just the amount of money it would take to put an armed guard in every school. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not against arming a select number of people in each of the schools if that's what they choose to do so, but I'm not in favor of legislating that. I think that needs to be a school decision. And I'm not in favor, like the NRA would suggest, is that we use federal monies to put more police officers into school. I'm not in favor of that. Again, you have the federal government in something, they're going to mess it up. So it's best to keep it a local decision, and Indiana law provides for schools to designate a security guard that can be armed or security guards, and so the law allows that for now. And I think the issue is making sure that these guards collaborate with the school system and with the police, the local police, so that when we respond to the scene, that things are handled appropriately, so we don't get a teacher shot inadvertently or a staff member shot by police. So we need to. It's not just as easy as to say, well, we're going to arm the teachers. Some teachers obviously that probably shouldn't be carrying a gun. Some that don't want to, and I'm perfectly fine with that. But there's others that would take that responsibility on, whether it's a janitor, a principal, or whoever. And they should have appropriate training. And in fact, I met with area superintendents yesterday to talk about plans and some of the things that we would suggest, and working with them and their desires. So it's a collaboration. It's not government telling the schools what to do, but giving them choices and helping them be informed, letting them know what the police are thinking. And then, of course, we get to know what they're thinking, and it's all for the purpose of protecting our kids and our community.
Great. Okay, well, Sheriff Brad Rogers, thank you for coming on today. It's been great to have you.
John, good to be with you. Anytime.
Okay, thanks. Good talking to you.
All right.
Yeah, I think that the gun control debate, especially recently, has really taken off, just with all of the gun sprees. And like we mentioned a couple minutes ago, there's so many different ideas out there, and it was great to hear his take on them. And basically, I think his underlying philosophy is the decisions should be made at the local or state level and keep the federal government out of it, which sounds like a good idea to me.